What do you think about your new pastor? He's all right. At the frontier, we've got it's all right down here. It's all right. How many months has it been now? 6 months. Wow, 6 months. You doing all right, Paul? Got a thumbs up from Paul, so we're all right. We're okay. Well, it's lovely to be back with you after 6 months. That's really good, and it's nice to see so many. All the chairs nearly are all full, and it's great to see the growth of the church. We pray for you often, and we thank God for all that He's doing in the life of the church. Isn't it great? I'd forgotten you played the keyboard as well. Yeah, no, you didn't. What do you mean a bit? That was great. I knew you played the guitar, but I didn't really. Wow. Hey, this lady just said you played the drums as well. Oh, they're up there. All right. Okay. Somebody's put them up there, so whenever you played them last, it mustn't have been very good. Um, so that's great. That's lovely. We thank God for your placement here, both you as a family as well. And are you happy? Yeah. Oh, we nearly had a little round of applause there. That's great. That's good. Well, it's nice for me and my wife to be with you today and to join in with worship. I'm this year, every church, whether it's in this country or overseas, I've I felt commanded by God to speak on the subject of the altar. And so I'm working my way through the Bible, and so I've not preached this message before. Um, if it's rubbish, please tell me, and then I won't use it again. Um, but I found that the altar is the thing. If somebody says, "What is the Bible all about? What's the Bible about?" It would be this. And in the Old Testament, it's called the altar. You turn into the second section of the Bible, the New Testament, and it's called the cross. And the altar and the cross are the same. It's about something, someone that has taken your place. Because you and I, because of the sins of our life and because of the way we have lived our life, we needed someone to represent us before God who's holy and perfect in every way. And in the Old Testament, you have the word altar and how they would take spotless, perfect animals as much as they could, lay them on the altar, and the sins of our lives were laid upon that animal. And although it's very strange in our culture to understand it, but as they burnt upon the altar, then they believed that they were acceptable before God because the sins of their life were placed upon the animal. And then you come into the New Testament and you come to the cross, and there's one who went to the cross for you and me, and his name is Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. It is the crucial altar. Now, I was brought up in the Salvation Army. Anybody else been brought up in the Salvation Army? Oh, you were. So you'll know, and as well. So you'll know what I'm talking about when I talk to you about the mercy seat. The mercy seat. The mercy seat in the Salvation Army, they don't have big altars, elaborate altars. My wife was brought up in a Church of England, And anybody been brought up in the Church of England? Yeah, okay, so you know about the altars, you know about going forward to the altar, and it depends what kind of Church of England it was. If it was a cathedral, would have an elaborate altar. And if it was a Bob Standard Church of England, it would still have an amazing altar. And you'd come forward and you would bow down at the altar, and you maybe take communion at that place, and the minister, the priest, the vicar would pray for you. In the Salvation Army, we had this, and I was in the Salvation Army until I was 14, and we had this long bench at the front. Remember? Long bench at the front. It was called the mercy seat. And that's where people would come to know Jesus. They would come, and that's what I did when I was a young boy. I came forward and knelt at the mercy seat, and that's when I committed my life to God. It was the altar. And you and I have been in many altars, I'm sure. On your holidays, you're going to cathedrals, big cathedrals in Europe, and maybe perhaps across the world, and you've seen these gold and silver, brilliant places, wonderful altars where people come, and the thought is that at that place they meet with God. If there's one word that would summarize the whole of the Bible, what is the Bible all about? It would be that. It would be the altar. That's what it's all about. And whether you call it the altar or the cross depends on which side of the Old Testament or the New Testament you're looking in at. It's the same word. It's the same meaning. It's about coming and meeting with God. When I was 14, my parents, we moved into Elam Pentecostal Church from the Salvation Army. And I stopped going to the mercy seat. And my dad was a pastor. And after every preach, he would have a call. Do you know what it was called? Oh, it was the altar call. And every time he preached, he would have an altar call. And I was his most reliable person in the church, because I would be there at every altar call. Even if nobody else moved, you know, they had the arms folded. Oh, sorry if you've got your arms folded. Some of you move position then. You know, even if I won't go to the altar, you know, and I'll dig in. He could rely on me. He could rely on his son. He'd be there at the front. He'd walk to the front. What we believed was that in the Elam church, all this space at an Elam church, people would leave their seats and they would come and stand at the front in response to the altar call. Where was the altar? There was no gold and silver. There was no mercy seat. There was no bench to come and kneel down. It was just like a space. But we believed that in response to the preaching of the word, a call to meet with God at an altar in a space like this was a call of the heart to meet with God and to say, I want God. I want to renew my commitment to God. I want to lay my life before God. The altar call. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? The altar is crucial, and it is everything to the Christian. Without the altar, you have no faith. The altar is everything. Without the altar, you have no relationship. It is the center of the Christian's life, because you understand that the ultimate, the greatest altar is the altar of Jesus Christ, the cross. And the whole Bible and all of our experience is based around God who came in flesh, His name Jesus, who went to the cross and laid his life down, laid himself upon the altar of the cross, so that you and I can have forgiveness, not be separated from God, but have a new life in God. Amen. So throughout the whole Bible, once you start to think about the word altar, you start seeing it on a whole pile of pages. The very first person who builds an altar is Noah, although it could have been Abel, because who was the brother of Cain, the sons of Adam. It could have been him, although it's not described as an altar. But the first person is Noah. Then you go into Abraham, who built 4 altars, and then you go into his son Isaac, who built an altar. And then you come to the grandson of Jacob, who built 2 altars, and we're going to look at one of them right now. Jacob, not a great guy in terms of being trustworthy. You wouldn't trust Jacob as far as you could throw him. Jacob was known as the deceiver, the schemer. He spoke, his mouth was moving, but it meant nothing. One of those kind of people. I'm sure they don't exist in Darlington. But that's the kind of person he was. His twin brother Esau, they were twins, but this amazing story as Jacob is born second, but Jacob then dupes his twin, deceives his father who's dying, and in their upbringing, their culture, the first person out of the womb is the one who has the birthright, who has all of the blessings of being the firstborn. And it wasn't Jacob, but Jacob, with the help of his mother, deceived his father, and he ends up getting the firstborn's blessing. He removes it from Esau, and he gets it. It's really important in their culture and in their religion, and he has deceived his father and his brother. He gets the firstborn blessing, and he runs away, and he legs it, and he runs it for 20 years. He runs away from the family. He gets 2 wives, has children, works for an uncle who's as deceptive as he is. His name is Laban. And he has to work for 20 years. And then one night, during the night, when Laban is not watching, he's away, Jacob packs up everything and his wives and children and livestock, and through a deceptive way comes back home after 20 years. Knowing that he's going to have to meet his brother Esau, he sends gifts to him ahead of him before he meets his brother. And as he sends those gifts, he's alone at a place called the Jabbok River. And he stands there alone. He's sent everybody ahead of him, and he's on his own. And one night, he has a meeting with God in such a way that, well, he's never had a meeting like it. It's a theophany of God. It means that God appears in human form in the Old Testament. And he meets with Jesus Christ, the Son of God, at the Jabbok River. And God himself touches Jacob's hip. So from that moment on, he never walks the same. He's forever disabled because he wrestles with God. And out of that experience, he walks with a limp. This is his story. He reunites with Esau, and then he continues ahead. And we're going to read from Genesis 33, and I'm going to read 4 verses. Genesis 33 from verse 18. He's just met with Esau. I've just told you that story up to then. And he's moving on from having met with his brother. In Genesis 33 and verse 18. I don't know if you get that on the screen, I'm not sure. But Genesis 33 and verse 18, it says this. After Jacob, oh, aren't you clever here? After Jacob came from a place called Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohi Israel. He could have named it anything. He could have named that altar anything he wanted. He could have called it God of my fathers. He could have named it the God who kept me safe, the God who brought me back. But Jacob, he thinks about the encounter he's just had with God at Jabbok, where God touched him physically, and for the rest of his life, he walked with a disability. And he thinks about that moment, and he says, I'm going to call on El Elohi Israel, God, the God of Israel. Because that night, God gave me a new name. No longer would I be called Jacob, I will be called Israel. It's not polished faith. It's not all worked out. He's not perfected. He's still very much a man with quite a past, and also a man that would have to learn how to walk differently, not just because of his lameness, but because he'd met with God. There's still a lot of things to work out. He wasn't perfected in every way. But this is about a faith of a man that this faith was forged in something that happened in the darkness of night when he was on his own, and he fought with this theophany of God, with the angel. And he builds an altar now, reflecting on his experience with God. And he says, I'm going to build an altar. Now, the altar that he built was certainly not the gold and silver shrines that you've seen as you tour some of these amazing cathedrals and large churches. It's not. It was not a nice area in the Salvation Army where they called the mercy seat. It was a pile of stones. It was something very rudimentary, something very basic. Didn't look much at all, but it was special for the person who built that altar before God and where they first worshipped. When people look at your life, what altar are they reading? What altar are they seeing when they look at you? When they engage with you? What is there? What is the heart of your life? Where is your worship? Where is the most important thing of your life? What is that? We're going to look at that now. When people look and looked at Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. They saw it was, it was a place where God had changed, his life had met with God. It was a place where he encountered God. Jacob arrives at this place called Shechem. Shechem is where his grandfather Abraham had encountered God when he first entered into Canaan, which would become the promised land. And in Genesis chapter 12, God calls Abraham out of Ur and leads him to the promised land. And the Bible tells us he passed through this place called Shechem, this exact place. And it was at that place, there was a great tree of Moreh that God appeared to Abraham and said, to you, to your offspring, I will give this land. And it was the beginning of Abraham understanding about the promised land that would become his blessing. And Abraham's response when God spoke to him and said that was, I'm going to build an altar here. There was already an altar created by his grandfather as part of his story. And Shechem sits in the heart of Canaan. It's the place where the promises were first spoken over that land. And Jacob's arrival here is no coincidence. God has brought him back to the very place where it all began. But there's something important that's going to happen. Jacob doesn't simply pass through Shechem and moves on. He camps there, and more significantly, he buys a plot of land and he purchased that ground for 100 pieces of silver. It's a lot of money. And he pitches his tent there. This is a man who is saying, okay, I've arrived. I'm not running anymore. I'm not going to run and deceive people anymore. I'm going to purchase this land. I'm going to build an altar. And I'm going to say, I am here and I belong here. In our lives, there are always those moments where God waits for you and I to say, I am here and I belong here. And he asks you and I to plant our roots in a church, in a community, in a place where we said, it's here that I'm going to grow. It's here that I'm going to worship God. It's here that I'm going to encounter God. I'm here because God has said so. I'm here for a reason. Jacob had a place where he would build an altar. This church is a place where you come and build altars. This church group of people on this street, in this heart of this community, that you come in, week out, and you sit in the same seat. Maybe you don't. Or sit on the same side. I always sit on this side. Although I understand some people have moved sides recently, which quite radical. That's quite radical. Some have sat in the same seat for years. Is where I sit. You know, this is my side of the church. I don't move, and that's all right. When I was a pastor, there was a moment once when I was understanding that people were sitting in the same seat and they've been there for 50 years. And this is where I sit, is where God meets me. I always sit here. So I moved the church around without any notice. And oh my goodness me, they were not happy. and very confused because where do I sit now? Where, where should I be? But this is your place. This is your community. This is where God meets with you. This is where you are every Sunday or midweek in your prayer meetings. This is your place. You may have a place at home, a favorite chair. This is where I go to pray. This is where I read my Bible in this room. Or you may have a favorite walk. You may have a favorite path. But this is my place. This is where I am. This is where I walk my dog this way, and I always talk to the Lord down this road. We have these moments that become very special to us. And where God knows those places, and God will meet with you. There's a place for Jacob, and there is a reminder of a wound that changed the direction of his life. Sometimes we think that the wounds are just of the devil and just of the enemy, and we just want to reject them continually and forget about them. We want to pray against them. We want to pray the wounds. We want to be healed. We want to move on. There's some wounds, it seems in the Bible that there are some wounds that actually are really come from the author of life, that the wound itself has changed the axis of our life, the direction of our life, and will never be the same because of that wound. Our whole faith is based upon the wounds of God, upon the wounds of hands and feet and thorns in his head, wounds that have saved our lives, wounds that have changed us, that will never be the same again because we came to understand that the wounds of God saved us, cleansed us, changed our lives. Wounds can be the best things. So after arriving and settling in this place near the city of Shechem, he builds an altar. He names it El Elohi Israel, God, the God of Israel. Now don't think about the nation. He's talking about himself because his name has been changed in that encounter, which I'll talk about in a moment. He's now no longer Jacob. God said to him, you will now be called Israel. And he names this altar El Elohi Israel, 3 words. But packed into those 3 words, what's behind Elohi Israel is a journey, a struggle, a wound, and grace. You can't understand the altar that we've been reading about here unless you do go back to the Jabbok, unless you go back to the river and see what happened to Jacob, where he wrestles in the night with this mysterious figure. He doesn't know what he's wrestling with at that moment in time until later, which is often the case. You think you're going through some tough stuff, you're going through some struggles, and you may even appropriate the struggle that you're going through to an enemy, to someone who's not for you. You don't maybe understand that at this moment in time. It doesn't feel like God. It doesn't feel like God is shaping you. God is doing something in your life. God is holding back something, or God is pressing into you. But later you may recognize that actually you weren't fighting the devil at all. You weren't struggling with him at all. The devil was nowhere near you. But it was actually God who was changing you. God who was shaping your life. God who was using some of the incredible tough times of your life to bring a renewal to you, to transform your life. You recognize that now as you look back. Jacob wrestled with this mysterious figure, and he refused to let go until he received a blessing. And what he got a permanent limp, but he got a new name. He got a new name. See, that permanent limp for him was a sign that he would never be the same again. Have you been like that all your life? No, I'm walking differently now. It was, let me tell you about that night. When I got a new name. See, when you've encountered God, when you've met with Him, and His mark upon your life changes your life, and you'll never forget it. It's as fresh as ever, and there's always something that there's some deposit of God left in your life, some mark that you'll never walk the same way again. Things have changed from that moment. The struggle for the presence cost Jacob everything that he thought defined him. It cost him his name. You all like it. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't like their own name. Otherwise, there's something wrong. It's too late anyway. You've given a name. That's it. I suppose you can change it if you want to, but it'll cost you. But he was given this name, and that name which symbolized everything that was wrong about him. It symbolized his deception. It symbolized all the lies he told. It symbolized all the things that he had done wrong to his own family, the ways that he had cheated and stolen and lied all the way through his life. That's what the name Jacob means. And it symbolized who he was. And God came and gave him a new name. And it cost him not only his name, it cost him his power. He became lame from that moment. And he starts a new life, changed, walking awkwardly. The limp is a living reminder that God touched my soul. And he names that place Peniel. It means the face of God. For that's what he experienced and survived. To know that God is looking into our souls, and in his love he has spared you and me. That's true brokenness. There's nothing stronger than someone who has been made lame by God, who has got a mark of God upon their life, a mark of imperfection, something just not quite perfect. But God has overseen that, because there's nothing more to prove and there's nothing more to fear. The old fight has gone in Jacob. The old aggression has been laid to rest. And now there's an emptiness that only God can fill, an emptiness reserved for the presence of God alone. Every church community, every group of Christians must know a Jabbok experience. It's the place of surrender, the place where you have met with God, wrestled with God, and laid your identity down, followed by a Peniel experience, which is the face of God. In the Jabbok experience, you wrestle with God and he touches you. In the Peniel experience, you stop looking for what is in the hands of God and you start looking for his face. Jacob doesn't just build an altar, he breaks down the names. He calls this altar El. It means God. Supreme, sovereign, mighty one. This is your altar. I'm here for you. You are in control of my life. He calls this altar El Elohi. It means the God of, the God who belongs to, who is bound to, who is associated with. And then he puts his new name on the end, Israel, his own name, given to him by God at Jabbok. There is the place, the wound. Let me talk to you about the witness. He doesn't say, El Elohi Abraham. We may have grandparents, and you remember their faith and how wonderful they were. And you may like talking about your grandparents' faith, their relationship. He doesn't say Elohi Isaac, that's his dad, his father. And maybe you look at your parents and you might think, you might like to talk about them, say how wonderful they were, their faith, the things that they did in the church, in God. No, no. He says, this altar I name El Elohi Israel. He is my God. At some point, every person must move from the God of my parents, the faith of my parents, to my God. My God. Your parents should not have a closer relationship with God than you have. You should have your own close relationship with God. Jacob's altar is a declaration that he has stopped borrowing or stealing from other people. He has his own encounter. He has his own faith. He has his own wound, his own name. And God is his God. His relationship with God is as important as the previous generation. His new name, Israel, was not given a comfortable moment. It was given in a difficult time. Direction for him, new direction, cost him as his hip was touched. So when he names the altar El Elohi Israel, he knows that this altar, this is not just a pile of stones. It's not just a geographical place where he comes to worship, but it's more a reflection of his own heart that this has cost his heart, it's cost his inner life everything, this change of name. He's saying this, the God I worship is the God who met me in my most difficult night, who wounded me while he blessed me, but I'm never going to trade that encounter for anything. There is a kind of faith that only comes through wrestling, through difficulty, through challenge. It's not through a polished event, not through some inheritance passed down to you or some comfortable faith, but it's a faith that's forged in struggle and difficulty when you didn't know what was going to happen, how it was going to turn out, but you held on to something because you thought that God must be in this. God must be near me. God must be here. This is a kind of faith that from that moment on, and for Jacob, who's now called Israel, he builds this altar, and he knows that from now on I'm walking with a limp, not because anybody in this world or the enemy of my life has touched me, but because God touched me, God broke me, God stepped in and changed my life, and I will never be the same again. I won't walk the same again because God touched my hip. Has God touched you? Because if God has touched you today, then you are changed. You are changed. The wound and the blessing, they're not opposites. Sometimes you may think, God, why am I wounded like this? God, I wish you'd fix this. God, I wish you would do that for me. The wound and the blessing sometimes come together. If you didn't have the wound, you may never be the person that you are today. And today, you are an example to the world that there is a God who cares, who loves, who is here. And you may look in the mirror and say, well, I don't see perfection, and you won't this side of heaven. Many people sit in churches week in, week out, and they carry the faith of their parents. Why do they come to church? They perhaps may not know why they come to church, but they've been coming to the church since their parents brought them. Jacob's altar, which he named El Elohi, my new name, Israel, is a declaration that he has stopped borrowing from the previous generation. It's not enough to say, well, I've been coming to this church for X amount of years, and my parents came to this church for X amount of years. You might be able to say, my grandparents came to this church for X amount. That's not enough. You have to have your own encounter. It has to be living. It has to be full of God. You have to be able to say, I met God. God is in my life. Can you see it on my face? Can you see it in the way that I live my life? People need to say, what's wrong with you? I've changed. Hey, listen, start calling me by a different name, because I'm no longer a deceiver. Every time people mention my name, they were talking, saying that I was a cheater. Jacob, don't call me that anymore. Call me by the name which means prince. Call me by Israel. That's my new name. I have to call you a new name? Yeah. You want us to call you a new name? Yeah. Can you imagine doing that? Why? Because I've met with God. I'm changed. Now, you can only say that if you have changed, because your friends and your neighbors, they know whether you've changed or not. Some people just change their name but remain the same. But if you're going to change your name because God's calling you to change your name, it's because God has met you and you have changed. I'm a new man in Christ. I'm a new creation in Jesus. The text says Jacob camped within sight of this city called Shechem. And it's within the sight of the city that he builds an altar, not inside a garden shed, not inside his house, but he builds this altar within sight of Shechem. It's not a private chapel in a little tent somewhere so that nobody can see. He builds an altar that everybody can see. I want everybody to know that I am building an altar. And when I light the fire, I want them to see the smoke rising from this altar. I want my faith to be known. I want everybody on my street. I want everybody in the city of Shechem to know that Jacob has changed his name and he's lighting a fire, an altar towards God. Who knows about you? Who knows? Maybe it's a refresher that we need to do. Maybe we just need to remind our friends and our family and the people that we know, hey, I just need to remind you that in this world where it's just gone bonkers, and there's so much evil in the world and everybody hates one another, I want to remind you that I found love, the perfect love. I found a God who loves the world so much that he gave his only son. Jacob, Israel, is a foreigner in Shechem, in a Canaanite city. He's just paid a significant sum for this land. And the first thing he builds, we read, he doesn't build a house, he doesn't builds something for his family. He builds an altar, an unmistakable declaration. I want everybody to know who I belong to. And remember, this is a man who was the greatest deceiver at the time, the greatest liar, the greatest cheater, who's changed his life because he met with God. He stakes a claim that goes beyond property rights, and he's saying, whoever sees this place will know whose we are. The altar is not primarily for Jacob's own comfort. It's a witness to a watching world who's looking even now at your life and my life. And it's not about what happens here that matters so much as when we leave this place today, when the world keeps watching you and me. It's this message. I know who my God is. El, the sovereign, mighty one. I know whose God is he. It's me. Elohi Israel, the God of the one who was wrestled with and changed. How do I know? I was there, and I have a limp to show. It's the invitation for every person who sits with a borrowed faith of the previous generation. You might say, oh, my friends and my family, my parents were in this church, and I'm now in the church. I've met people as I go around the churches, and I've met people who tell me that I'm in the same church that my grandparents were in. I said, that's wonderful. What I want to know is, are you worshiping God in the same way or even a greater way than your grandparents did? The altar is never built in easy seasons. You look at all the altars all the way through the Bible, it's never an easy season. It's always a sacrificial, deep commitment, a life-changing moment. Well, for him, after the wrestling and after the wound and after a new name, you may walk with a limp, you may carry a mark of that night, that moment you met with God. But the limp is not a defeat. The thing that you carry that is painful, a mark that won't change, it's not a defeat. It's the evidence that you were there, that you didn't let go, that you held on to God, who met you in the dark. And it's the same God you're journeying with, who's bringing you into new seasons, new things. My prayer is, as a church, that you'll rebuild an altar. You'll build a new altar. A new altar as a mark of a new day, a new season in your life. And God, well, has reserved the best for you, for all that lies ahead for you. Let's pray. Should we stand?